Hi friends, welcome to Raising Lifelong Learners. I'm your host, Colleen Kessler, and this is the podcast where I encourage you to trust yourself and your differently wired kiddos as you help cultivate their curiosity, encourage them to discover the world around them, embrace who they are wired to be, all while helping them discover their passions, interests, and raise them to become the amazing adults they're meant to be. Hey, welcome back. This is episode 267. Today we are talking all about critical thinking. So we're continuing our series on the 6 key learning skills from my brand new book, The Homeschool Advantage, a child-focused approach to raising lifelong learners that you can grab anywhere books are sold. We've already talked about the first 3 C's in the key learning skills. We've talked about collaboration, communication, and content. Today we are going to talk about critical thinking. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about because I think especially in the times we're living in today, critical thinking is so important, and we need to develop the skill in our kids and help them see and understand and learn to think with their critical thinking brain so they can make decisions for themselves and trust themselves on those decisions. So I know you're going to love this episode. There's lots of great tidbits that you're going to be able to pull out, and I'm super excited to bring this topic to you. Before we get on with our episode, though, I just want to remind you to check out CTC Math. CTC is a sponsor that has supported this podcast for the last several years, and we are so appreciative of them. I'm not just a supporter of CTC or someone whose podcast they sponsor, but I'm a customer and have been for about 7 years. I love the program. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later on in this episode, but if you haven't had a chance, check out ctcmath.com. Let them know I sent you. You won't regret it. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. All right, so let's talk about this 4th C of homeschooling success, the key learning skill of critical thinking. If you've been following along, you know that we are in the middle of a series exploring these 6 C's. We've talked about collaboration, we've talked about communication, and we've talked about content. And if you missed those first episodes in this series, you can go back in your podcast app or online at the website, raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast, and you can check out those previous episodes anytime it's convenient for you. These principles are designed to equip our kids with the skills that they'll need in the future, not just academically, but for life. So, like I said, we've covered connection, collaboration, and content, and we're diving in today to critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of those buzzwords. We hear about it a lot, but aren't always 100% sure what it means. So let's talk first about what critical thinking even is. Simply put, it's the skill of questioning, of analyzing, and then forming your own independent conclusions. In the world that we're living in, with its fast pace and constant buzz of information and social media and trends, this skill is more important than ever. We're constantly bombarded. Kids have a ton of information coming at them from all sides. They're aware of everything that's going on everywhere and hyper-focused on what others are doing and how they're measuring up. And we really want to nurture critical thinking in our kids so that they can navigate the world with curiosity and confidence and not just get caught up in whatever's going on just because it's what's going on. Critical thinking is essential in today's world because we live in an information age. We have access to more knowledge than ever before. And with this constant flow of information, it's easy to get swept away by flashy headlines or persuasive opinions. Critical thinking is the skill that helps our kids sort through it all. It gives them the tools to ask questions, to evaluate what they're seeing, and most importantly, to form their own judgments. Remember those programs? I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself here, but the programs that promise to teach your baby to read in just a few days, or the ones that claimed your child would become brilliant if they just watched these certain videos on repeat. I remember back when my oldest, Trevor, was young, we watched Baby Einstein videos all the time. Everyone was doing it. Now, I wasn't convinced that Baby Einstein videos was going to make my kids the newest little Einsteins, but I was caught up in the idea that certain types of music and certain types of patterning was really going to help my kids and set their thinking apart from others. But at the end of the day, it's not a gimmick or a trend that's going to help our kids understand their world or be better thinkers. And it's not about cramming knowledge in. Life and thinking is about helping our kids make sense of the world around them and to think for themselves. When I was having Trevor watch those Baby Einstein videos and then my other kids came along and enjoyed them, I learned quickly what was helping him grow, what was helping them grow wasn't the videos themselves. It was the conversations we had based on the things that we'd seen in the videos, the questions the kids asked, the way I encouraged them to explore their world and make comparisons and contrast what they were seeing in the videos and draw parallels and things like that. I remember being blown away sometimes at the knowledge that my kids would have about music or art because they saw a piece in Little Einsteins on the Disney Channel, or they saw something in, or they learned something in like Octonauts and told me about a fish or a sea creature I'd never heard of before. Those conversations and the exploration of their world is what makes thinking beautiful and what helps our brains, their brains, learn. Critical thinking isn't something you can buy or download. It's a skill that you develop and you can help your kids develop through engagement, curiosity, and open conversations. One of the best ways to nurture critical thinking in our families is by asking open-ended questions. In fact, in my book, The Homeschool Advantage, there is an entire section about there's a section in chapter 7 about the elements of creativity and critical thinking and the power of questions. And then there's a whole section with dozens and dozens of open-ended questions that you can use in any scenario to just help your kids think, help them dive deeper into what's going on around them. Instead of just giving our kids the answers, we can encourage them to think them through. Questions like, why do you think that happened? Or what would you have done differently? Can open up a space for our kids to reflect, analyze, and come to their own conclusions. For example, when one of my kids was taking a writing class, they had to critique others' writing. They weren't able to just say, this part was bad, or I don't think this works. They had to explain why they thought that. Developing the ability to back up our opinions with reasoned arguments is an essential part of critical thinking. It's about being able to look at our own thoughts and challenge them. It's about looking at the things around us, processing why we are reacting the way we are, and then using that processing and the reasons we figure out from that processing to help make our arguments so that they make sense and the conclusions that we draw are actual and valid. This is a skill that all of us can benefit from. Another way, besides active questioning, that we can foster critical thinking skills in our home is through games and through play. Games are fantastic for encouraging critical thinking. Think about it. Every game has rules, and kids have to learn these rules, follow them, and sometimes, depending on the game, bend them in creative ways to win. Games teach kids how to strategize, evaluate options, and spot patterns. But they also teach them to handle disagreements, which is another key aspect of critical thinking. We've all seen our kids argue about who goes first or whether a move was allowed in a game. And while it might seem like a squabble, these moments are actually teaching them valuable lessons about negotiation, compromise, and problem solving. When we step back and let our kids work it out, we're helping them to develop the skills they need to think critically and communicate effectively. Now, many of you listening probably have a couple of kids like I've had who just really struggle in gameplay or with what's fair and what's not, and that judgment piece that a lot of our gifted and twice exceptional kids have. And sometimes we have to take some of these strategies and realize that this isn't right for our kids at this particular moment, and maybe it's something we should or could revisit later. So make sure, as you're listening to these ideas for fostering critical thinking in your kids, you're remembering the kid that you have and figuring out what would work right now and what you can come back to later. Because when we're building toolboxes, whether that's through anxiety strategies like in the anxiety toolkit that I sell on the website, or developing critical thinking, we're building a set of tools that we can draw from when we need to. And some may work now and not work down the road, and we might have to switch it up and then go back to another strategy later. So we want to build up many tools. Okay, another tool is storytelling. When we use storytelling to help build critical thinking skills, we share our own experience. They learn from the decisions we made and the lessons that we learned. And by storytelling, I mean talking about your own childhood, talking about your own teen years, talking about your own school experiences, your relationships, your dating that you experienced when you were young, as your kids are entering those ages. My kids love hearing stories from when I was younger, and those stories often spark questions. They'll ask why I made a certain choice, or what I might have done differently, or how I felt about it afterwards. We've talked about different things that they see now and wonder why I am involved in the different situations or have made different choices that I've made throughout my life. And in viewing them through their current lenses, why I would have done that. And I can sit down and tell them 20 years ago when I made this particular decision, or I chose this particular place to go or live, or this particular job to do, I was this person, and I've evolved, I've grown, I've matured, I've had different life experiences, and so now I'm in this place. And when I made that decision, this is the place that I was in, and right now, this is the place that I'm in. And we can help our kids see how people change and how it's not just black and white or cut and dry or what they're viewing things right now. And it helps them set themselves up for being able to be adaptable in the future. Asking questions is central to understanding the world. It's something we should always encourage in our kids. The next time your kiddo asks why, resist the urge to give them a quick answer. Instead, ask them what they think or how they feel about it. This can turn the conversation into a two-way street and helps them develop their own perspectives while you're sharing yours. Hey there. Okay, you've heard me talk about CTC Math for a long time, and I've been sharing testimonials from other people about it, but I want to share my own right now because it's been a while since I've talked about how we're using CTC Math. CTC is an amazing sponsor. They support our work here at the podcast. They actually sponsor a lot of different homeschool businesses and magazines and events because they're so committed to making sure that the homeschool resources you have at your fingertips are available to you, that you have access to what you need when you need it. I love CTC Math for that part of who they are, but I also love CTC Math as a customer. I have been a paying customer for years and years. My kids are using it in very different ways, and this is what I want to talk about. I've talked before about its adaptability, but let's talk about this. I'm 16 years into homeschooling. This is my 16th year, and our kids are using it very differently. I've got one kiddo who's very advanced in math. That kiddo is a grade level and a half ahead, and I have their level set to mastery at 90%, meaning they have to get 90% or above to move on to the next set of math problems because that child doesn't have to speed through it. They're already a year and a half ahead. And so I want them, if they're going to continue to accelerate, I want them to accelerate with deep understanding. My other kiddo who's currently using it is right on grade level, maybe a couple lessons behind. And so that kiddo's mastery is set at 80% because I don't need that kiddo to understand every single section and get every single problem right. I need that kiddo to understand the big picture of the concepts, get at least a B's level of work done so that they can move on to the next level because that particular kiddo is probably not going into a mathy career. but they need the basic understanding. CTC allows the flexibility to do that. If you've got a kiddo, say in late elementary school, who is absolutely brilliant in math and can skip ahead to some high school level math, your subscription includes all the way up to calculus. You don't have to wait. You don't have to buy multiple levels of programs. If you've got a kiddo who you hit a snag and you realize, oh my gosh, we missed that section when we were learning third grade math and now we've got to go back to do it. You don't have to go out and buy a third grade math workbook. You just go to the section in the third grade math program level and have your kiddo do that. How flexible is that? You have every level from kindergarten all the way to calculus at your fingertips for a very affordable price. Check out ctcmath.com. If you go over to the show notes and you click on the link, it will give you whatever the current discount or special they're offering Raising Lifelong Learners listeners. And you can check that out and take advantage of that. I so appreciate CTC. I know you're going to love it. And if you don't, they have a money back guarantee. So you really do have nothing to lose. If you have any questions about CTC, you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to answer those questions. All right, let's get back to today's episode. We can also build critical thinking skills through reading and literature. Books are an amazing tool for critical thinking. When a story takes an unexpected turn or presents a challenging theme, it invites kids to ask questions. Why did the character do that? What could have happened instead? This kind of thinking helps them see the world in shades of gray rather than just black and white. And we all know that when we're raising neurodivergent kids, there's a lot of black and white in their thought process. And the world is rarely cut and dry like that. It's rarely just black and white. And we need to help our kids see those shades of gray so they can adapt to the way the world is. Kids are also naturally curious about relationships. So they might ask, why did Anne say that about Aaron? I thought they were friends. These are opportunities to talk about human behavior, to explore why people do what they do, and to help them understand the complexity of social relationships. We can ask them how they'd feel in that situation, what they would do differently, or how they think the characters in the story could resolve their issues. These conversations help kids realize that they don't always have to accept everything as it is. They can think critically and imagine other possibilities. This transcends the idea of teaching kids critical thinking through like the stories, because when we do it that way, we can help them separate themselves from the situation or a situation and then empower them so that when they get in a situation that's a little tricky or difficult, they're more able to speak up or out against something. We recently had a situation where one of my kids recognized an injustice in a place that they were spending a lot of their time. And at first stayed quiet because they didn't want to mess things up or be considered a person who blabs. And then they witnessed more and more of these injustices happening and finally chose to do the right thing and speak up. And it was hard. It was not an easy thing to do, but it was the right thing to do. And there was some fallout, and then there was some pushback, and then there were some additional conversations. And the situation resolved itself in the right way. And so our kiddo was able to see justice being served in the correct way and was able to emerge as a leader who stands up for others who don't necessarily have a voice. We want our kids to do that. So when we can share stories of characters standing up against injustices, our kids can learn to do that too. We want to make sure that we create an environment that encourages critical thinking in our families so that they feel safe to express their opinions and their thoughts and their feelings at home so that they're more likely to do this when they're out. To really foster critical thinking, it's all about creating that environment, an environment that values respect and curiosity. When our kids know that their questions and ideas matter, they are more likely to explore and to challenge themselves. It's about letting them know that it's okay to think differently, it's okay to ask hard questions, and it's really okay to make mistakes. This right here is respectful parenting at its core. When we show our kids that we value their curiosity, we're not only building their critical thinking skills, but we're strengthening our bond with them. And as parents, we're laying the foundation for the next generation of thinkers, problem solvers, and change makers. The world where our kids will grow up will be amazing because they'll believe that they can question and innovate and think beyond what's expected. And when we foster that bond through respectful parenting, through helping our kids understand that we value their opinions and their thoughts and the processes that go to create those thoughts, we create that safe place for them and they want to come back. They want to spend time with us. It builds the foundation of a relationship with our kids that's going to last a lifetime. And I don't know about you, but I want my kids to want to spend time with me as they grow into young adulthood and adulthood. I want my kids to know that I value and love them for who they are and their thoughts and their opinions on things. And I want them to want to spend time with me. I've been reflecting on that a lot over the last couple weeks. This podcast episode is being recorded over winter break and will be airing right after the holidays. And I've been thinking a lot about it because my kids are growing up. This time next year, my oldest daughter, my second oldest kid, will be visiting back from her first semester of college on winter break. And I want my kids to look forward to coming and spending time at home. I want them to know that I've got their back and that I respect their thoughts and their opinions and their plans for their own future. And so I want to lay that foundation so my kids know that critical thinking and curiosity is so important. And so I want us to think about, as we wrap up this episode today, critical thinking isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to ask questions. It's about exploring different perspectives and thinking for ourselves. We want our kids to know that it's okay to ask questions, to be asked questions. It's not a challenge to seek understanding. It's actually a sign of intelligence. When we nurture this in our kids every day, whether we're reading a book, telling stories, playing a game, or just having a conversation, we let our kids know that it's okay to wonder. In fact, it's the best thing in the world to be curious and to be a lifelong learner, and then to apply the things that they've learned to make the world a better place. I'm going to share some links in the show notes for this episode to other resources about critical thinking and developing critical thinking skills. I'd also encourage you to think about joining us in the Learners Lab. Every month, we focus on a different theme, and the themes relate to social and emotional skills and creative thinking skills that include critical thinking skills. Each month, we tackle a different topic, but then we build in the creative and the critical thinking skills around those topics. For example, in January this month, we're focusing on a theme of managing expectations. Within that theme, we're talking about critical thinking, thinking about how other people's expectations come into play too. So we have to manage our expectations because others are going to have different expectations in different situations. We are working on executive functioning skills because when we set ourselves up for success, we're managing our expectations. And in doing this, we have live clubs and classes and meetups for the kids. So they're connecting with each other through a facilitated kind of approach and working on these skills throughout the month. And then we also have some bonuses and extra activities for parents where they can get some group coaching and Q&As answered. They have the support they need to raise these creative and quizzical kids. And so we're there to support you in the process as well as your kids. So I'd encourage you, especially if you want to work on critical thinking this year, to join us in the lab because, first of all, we'd love to have you. It's a great community. And second of all, we really focus on those skills for our kids. Okay. So check out the show notes. There'll be links to all of that at raisinglifelonglearners.com/podcast. And tune in next week because we're going to dive into the 5th C, which is creativity. We're going to talk all about keeping that spark alive in our kids, helping them dream big and think outside the box. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a review. We really appreciate it. Also, shout out and thank you to CTC Math. We really appreciate your sponsorship. Check them out too. And thanks for joining me today. I know you have so many different pulls on your attention and your time. So I appreciate you. Until next time, keep the questions coming, encourage your kids to think differently, and remember, you've got this. You are the absolute perfect parent for your kid. You're the best teacher they have. Nobody loves them like you do. You're doing a great job, and I'm so proud of you. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great week. Bye for now.